The Ukrainian armed forces have run out of reserves. The Russian army has launched a major offensive. Good day, dear friends. Here, in our daily format, we analyze the situation on the front, break down the main events, look at maps, track advances and retreats, and provide an analysis with a perspective on how particular advances or retreats might affect the overall situation at the front. Today, there are many events on the front, but one deserves a separate and detailed analysis. We'll discuss it thoroughly today. Without further ado, let's open the map. The main event of recent days is, of course, the situation in the Kharkiv region. There are actually two key developments. One could be conditionally called good, and the other bad, or one as an advance, and the other as a retreat. Let's start with the first one, and then we'll talk in more detail about the retreat of the Russian armed forces from Kupiansk. This is not an attempt to sugarcoat the bitter pill with some good news. No, we speak as it is, objectively and impartially. The advance north of Kupiansk. The first event occurred north of Kupiansk, in the area near the village of Dvorichny. As I mentioned yesterday, Russian forces conducted an airborne operation, crossing the Oskil River in boats and deploying troops on the right bank. They managed to secure a foothold without encountering resistance. Why did this happen? The trenches and strongholds on the right bank were empty. There were simply no Ukrainian armed forces soldiers defending these positions. These fortifications, although well equipped, had been abandoned. Russian forces took control of all the strongpoints. From there, the advance continued. If we look at the map, you can see that the entire forested area on the right bank of the Oskil River near Dvorichny is currently under Russian control. Additionally, the village of Novosilka was also entered. Retreat from Kupiansk. However, Russian advancements on this axis are limited. Now let's move on to more challenging news regarding Kupiansk. The area currently marked in yellow and red on the map, signifying Russian control, will soon appear unshaded by evening. This morning, reports emerged, later confirmed, that Russian forces had withdrawn from the left bank part of Kupiansk. Importantly, they were not pushed out by the Ukrainian armed forces during battles. Instead, they voluntarily vacated their positions and moved to Lyman-Pervyi. This isn't an attempt to downplay the situation by claiming they weren't driven out, they left voluntarily. That's not the case. Let's detail the specifics. In the left bank area of Kupiansk, Russian forces controlled the following: the compound feed plant, the dairy plant, and the sugar factory, along with full control of streets such as Sosnova, Dostoyevsky, and Nekrasov. They also had access to Dzerzhinsky Street, which leads to the Kupiansk-Svatove highway. Over the past week, Ukrainian forces gathered reserves from surrounding areas under their control, which explains why positions near Dvorichny were left vacant. Troops were relocated to Kupiansk to participate in counterattacks. Meanwhile, Russian forces occupying key fortified zones on the left bank attempted to expand their control toward the western part of the left bank and the coastal area. However, advancing further proved impossible due to the elevated right bank of Kupiansk and a lack of sufficient manpower for larger operations. Russian forces were effectively in a vulnerable, low-lying industrial zone, facing relentless shelling. Command deemed holding these positions pointless and made the decision to withdraw. Why take unfavorable positions in the first place? The plan relied on surprise and disorganization within the Ukrainian ranks, potentially forcing them to retreat. While there was some chaos and panic initially, it was insufficient to achieve control of the entire left bank. The Russian command faced two choices: stay under heavy fire and expend reserves, or retreat. They chose to withdraw. Other frontline updates. Let's briefly touch on other areas. In Kurakhove, fighting is now taking place in the city center. Russian forces control a significant part of the city, and footage of urban combat in high-rise areas has emerged. In the area of Velyka Novosilka, battles for the settlement itself have begun, marking the start of an official engagement for this location. Yesterday, our forces initiated the assault on Velyka Novosilka. Combat operations in the southeast of Velyka Novosilka. Fighting continues in the southeastern part of the settlement, where our forces advanced to the outskirts yesterday. Now, our assault units, taking advantage of the temporary disarray among the enemy, are attempting to seize control of this strategically significant village in a swift operation. Simultaneously, flanking maneuvers are ongoing from the east and north. Yesterday, Rozdolna was fully captured, and intense battles are taking place for a strongpoint west of the village located on the Velyka Novosilka Bohatyr highway. This strongpoint has become a key defensive position for the enemy, forming a line of resistance to our breakthrough. It is noted that over the past day, the enemy's resistance in this area has noticeably increased. It seems the Ukrainian command has managed to deploy some combat-ready reserves here in an attempt to form a semblance of a stable front. Whether they succeed, and for how long, remains to be seen. Meanwhile, Ukrainian information sources describe the situation in this area of the front with one phrase: total disaster. Fighting along the Suki Yali River, Kurakhove. The situation for the enemy in this area continues to deteriorate rapidly. Yesterday's footage of the capture of high-rise buildings in the central part of Kurakhove, along with the partial destruction of a Ukrainian counterattack group attempting to retake them, demonstrated how deeply our assault units have advanced into the city. By evening, the breakthrough of our forces beyond the Kurakhove-Uspanivka highway surprised no one. The enemy's front here is highly fragile and continues to yield under our pressure. Our forces have crossed this highway, launching assaults toward Kostiantynopil, showing our determination to capitalize on the encirclement of the enemy's most fortified positions on the north bank of the Suki Yali River. Most likely, this movement, cutting through layers of fortifications running from south to north, while we advance from east to west, will continue until the Suki Yali River meets the Vovcha River. Parallel to these actions, Kurakhove will also be liberated. This process could accelerate and further destabilize the enemy if our forces strike at Rozliv or Bohatyr. Such a strike seems inevitable after the stabilization of the front near Velyka Novosilka, which will occur after our forces reach the Mokry Yali River and encounter the heights on its western bank. Selidov-Pokrovsk axis as of 26 November 2024. The main area of fighting here is the settlement of Jovta, from which our troops drove out the enemy yesterday. They continued advancing north along the railway, threatening the settlements of Dachenka and Shevchenko, which are already the southern and southwestern outskirts of Pokrovsk. This demonstrates that the commander of the center group, General Mordvichev, remains consistent in his approach to capturing major cities. The plan involves encircling the Pokrovsk agglomeration from the south and eventually the west. Once the city is surrounded on three sides, and with the enemy's reserves in the area stretched thin, an attempt will be made to take it with a short, concentrated assault, as seen in the case of Selidov.